Okay, we are live, I guess.
Yes, it's showing we are live.
Ben.
Hi guys, good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. I guess people in New Zealand are probably almost going to sleep now. Welcome to this lovely Zoom Feast Week chat from Deliverance Church. Every beginning of the month, we take off time to take stock of what God is saying to us for the month ahead and what we feel needs to be happening. And this particular this week has been based on the theme from the book of Isaiah in 54, where it says, enlarge the place of your tent, let them stretch forth the curtains of your habitations, and do not spare, lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes. We're looking in particular in the area of business, and our discussion for today is going to be focusing on how to enlarge the place of your tent, especially in the area of business post-COVID. Of course, as you might be well aware, the pandemic has ravaged the entire globe and has left no prisoners in its wake, literally claiming business after business on a daily basis. And it seems like it's just the beginning. We expect it to get maybe even worse for the next month or 2 or 3, and the recovery for the entire economy across the globe is expected to take up to 2 years. What does that mean for us, especially in light of this particular portion of scripture that we have that says that we should enlarge our tent pegs? How do you enlarge your tent pegs when the tent is closing in on you? Well, we have some very special people to help us navigate this. And of course, we've been doing this all week, and today you get to have a Q&A session where we'll answer your questions and of course have a lively discussion. I don't know if I've introduced myself. My name is Ben Mwine. You might have seen me somewhere before, but not recognize me because I now look like a terrorist. I don't know if that's politically correct even, but yeah, it's been quite interesting. I can't remember the last time I used what they call a puller, so I had to try and comb my beard today to try and look decent. You're going to be in front of many people, so yeah. Let me introduce our guests for today, starting with someone who has been a business entrepreneur involved in several startups and management of various local and regional business concerns. He's got a company called Woodstock Limited, which is a real estate development company. He's got Crystal Clear Entertainment, which is an events management company, and we'll talk about that in a bit in light of the fact of what's going on now. It's also a studio recording label, and Blue Cruise Group, a vibrant transport and logistics company, among several others. He has strategic focus and business acumen that he has gained over years, and he brings that to our discussion from being able to run all these businesses. He also sits on a number of business organization boards and brings a lot of strength from a perspective of strategic planning and functional efficiency. He also is an alumni of Hagai International, where he's been involved in leadership development and mentorship, and also has pioneered a leadership mentorship program and currently works on a leadership incubator program where emerging leaders are intensively trained over a period. He is married, happily married, we must add. That's very important, especially in these lockdown days where apparently some people are trying to kill each other. And he's got a beautiful wife and 3 lovely children who I'm sure are eating bread quicker than you can say good morning. Let's say good morning to Elder Stephen, as we call him, Stephen Ochola. Welcome to this chat. It's good to see you. How are you doing today?
Hi, Ben. I'm doing fine. Thank you so much for that long introduction, and I'm so happy to be here and to be hosted by you over this discussion. And we believe the Lord has also fine. He has kept us fine. Amen. We'll talk more.
I hope I didn't misrepresent the children in claiming that they're eating more bread than you can buy. I know how it works.
By the way, they are listening in, and they will have you for that the next time they meet you.
only if I'm not being accurate, though I have a very strong feeling I probably am right. Let's introduce your co-panel, who is someone who is very seasoned in the area of business, one of the people that I absolutely admire She brings tact and guile into everything that she does. One of the most classy people you will meet anywhere. But from a professional perspective, she has an MBA from Edinburgh Business School or Heriot-Watt University. Pagamba, she has studied a lot of Luzungu, which gives her the credibility to speak to us today. She's also a fellow of the Association of Certified Accountants, SCCA, a member institute of Certified Public Accountants of Uganda. She is a certified entrepreneurial trainer and a consultant by the Regent University Center for Entrepreneurship. So lots and lots and lots of books, but also has her own street cred as a business person, as a director of finance and training at Zadok Associates Limited, and also runs a beautiful, beautiful business at Garden City called More and More. The first More being M-A-U-A and More being the English word. Very interesting name as well. So please welcome with me Mrs. Lillian Katiso as she joins us as well. Good morning to you, Lillian.
Good morning, Ben. You murdered the name. It's Maua and More.
See, it seems a bit easier to say more and more because it rhymes, but yet they're different words. So, but yeah, Maua and more. What is Maua though? What does that mean?
Maua is Swahili for flowers.
Ah, of course.
Yes, so it's flowers and more.
Flowers and more. Okay, that puts a lot of context into it. And of course, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who is joining us on Zoom and on Facebook Live as well. And so we'll be getting into this discussion in detail in just a moment. But first, let me ask our guests how they've been dealing with the lockdown. So, for example, I know that Maua and More is currently not operational because, well, who's going to buy flowers when they can't go anywhere? Crystal Clear is probably in the same boat. If I'm not mistaken, Blue Cruise is not able to do a lot of the business that you normally would because people are not moving around as much as they should be. So let's start from that perspective. I'll start with you, Lilian, and then we'll come to Elder Stephen. How has this lockdown been affecting you personally in terms of your business?
Thank you, Ben. For More and More at Garden City, since the malls are closed and the transportation means are also limited, you either have to cycle or use a boda, neither of which I know how to ride. So the first 14 days were, of course, a bit tricky because the nature of plants, they need water. They can't wait for 35 or whatever number of days for you to go back to them. You find they're all dead. So we had to find a way of one of us who knew how to cycle to go there, to cycle every other day, water the plants, and then come back. But also what we realized is people are actually calling to say, we are at home doing nothing. We want to do our gardens. We want to, you know, to make us living rooms look better. So it's interesting that even with the lockdown, there are actually people buying plants. And the first 14 days, they were actually offended that we had closed and we can't even deliver. So in the third week, we started looking for how then to deliver to these clients. And we've been making deliveries like every Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You have to book in advance, and then we know which orders we have to go for, and then we just go do deliveries between, like, let's say between 10 a.m. to about 2 p.m. So it's limited business, but at least it's still going on. Because what I've learned is, as much as the businesses can be closed during the lockdown, if you also lock down your presence, people will think you've actually gone under. So you can still be on the lockdown physically, but be very alive online, which we have done that for Maua and More. We keep our clients alive and they actually place orders. For my trainings, for the consultancy bit, of course, the office is closed. But what I discovered, which has been a very interesting thing for me, is that people are willing to be trained online. And so I've actually ran a couple of trainings online. So it's not the same as the physical face-to-face classrooms, not classroom setting, but there's still people willing, because you're at home doing nothing the whole day. Okay, some people are at home doing nothing the whole day. And so if you learn a competency during that season, there are people who've learned an accounting software. During that season, there are people who've learned new skills to make their performance better after the lockdown. So I think there are different ways that one can reinvent their business, of course, depending on the nature of your business. So that's how I'm coping during the lockdown.
Right, and obviously you do need to learn how to ride a bike or boda because it seems like it might be something very important for for your business. You're missing out on money. What about you, Elder Steven? What's it been like for you? How bad has this pandemic hit your businesses?
Thank you so much, Ben. I'll start with definitely we've been hit. We've been hit, but the kind of hit we've had across the businesses has been more a hit that needs us to reinvent ourselves. I'll take, for example, like Blue Cruise. Blue Cruise, we have three different units, actually three different separate group businesses within the group. The hardest hit one was the one which does hospitality business. We've got that's Blue Cruise Hospitality. That one will hit from the early days of COVID because we service mostly the hotels, and you know, hotels were the very first ones to close. So that unit was hit hard, but it gave us time to be able to reinvent because we customized those cars and then shifted them to the next unit, which was dealing with the corporates. Now, soon after that, again, the corporates were hit and that unit was demobilized. But somehow we had to reinvent, and the few essential services that were allowed to continue operating obviously had a challenge of transport. So quickly we had to grab that opportunity, and we presented a new case, business case for them. And we've been working with them, though in a totally different way. We had to, get buses, we had to get costers, and quickly start working with these new people, and that's how it has been. So it's been a hit and reinvent kind of thing with regards to Blue Cruise. When you look at Crystal Clear, definitely that's an area that has been almost silently, doing nothing. We were hit hard there because I mean, entertainment has to do with gathering together, coming together. So what we are doing right now, we are trying to begin to also evolve and go online. We are beginning to have e-courses for the budding musicians, people who are at home, who really have nothing they're doing. They can get onto online courses for their music training. And we are exploring different areas, maybe even the things that we've been having, concerts and etc. Can we have them online? So that's an area which has been quiet, but we are working. For the Woodstone real estate, it has been a time for us to just clean up house. We've been doing a lot of repairs, expansions and preparation, because we know it's a down time for us now, but it's not going to be down forever. So we've taken advantage of that time, and it's actually kept me a lot busy, trying to do the customization, readjustments, expansion, repairs, knowing that, in the next few months, things should be looking up. So that's what has kept us busy in this time. And that's how our businesses have adjusted over the COVID period. Yeah.
Now, it will tilt the discussion in the angle of how to look at this from a spiritual perspective. For example, for those who don't understand that these things usually will have a very huge, significant impact on what happens in the business sense. Our theme verse from Isaiah 54 talks about enlarging the place of your tent, your tent pegs, and stretching forth the curtains of your habitations. And many people usually will focus on just that one verse without looking at the entire context of the chapter. And so if I start with you, Lillian, the truth of the matter is that even in the context of this particular scripture, it makes it very clear that God at some point is saying, I will not be angry with you forever. So there's already a place of, there's some chiboko in the mix, but he's saying this will pass. So enlarge the place of your tent, because things are going to get better. And even though you've been called forsaken or grieved in spirit, he says, for a small moment I've forsaken you, in verse 7. He says, but yet with great mercies I will gather you. And so the idea being that there definitely is a bit of pain in the mix. Is it possible that sometimes from a faith perspective, the children of God sometimes live in denial and call it faith because they fail to understand that even as a child of God, there will be times when things look very, very difficult, and you have to be able to deal with that. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, thank you, Ben. I think as Elder Stephen had mentioned in the last two sessions, and even as we are aware, life is not like a straight line. Things go like cycling. You have seasons and things happening. So, and there's always, as you said, every night is followed by a morning. You know, as long as day is there, there's going to be a night, and as long as night is there, there's going to be a day. And so I think the sooner that we realize that, you know, this night is not forever, then that's when we are going to be looking forward to the morning. And if you take longer in the night and just thinking about the night and the darkness in the night, you not plan for the morning. So that morning arrives and you have nothing to do. You had not planned to do anything with your daytime. And I'm seeing when the first 14 days, of course, were announced, it was all of us were taken aback. I think we're not prepared. And we're just thinking 14 days, you know, it's gone and everything. But personally, for me, I realized the moment I appreciated that, you know what, these 14 days, the sooner I start thinking differently, the sooner I'll start looking at the opportunities. As long as I was thinking of the negative, I wouldn't open my mind to think of the opportunities. Of course, it depends on how long you stay there mourning. And the longer you stay mourning, the more opportunities you miss out. And of course, the first 14 days, I was focusing on some studies that I was doing. Then when the president announced 21 more days, I was like, for real, it's another 21 days. So I better think. And that same day, when he said another 21 days, I just did an announcement for one of the courses online. I was waiting for the lockdown to be lifted for me to run the course. I said, no, now it's not going to work. And so actually, let me have the course running online. And I was amused. I got someone from Iganga, some people who would not actually have come physically to town to attend the course, but they were like, because it's now online, I really want to attend. And later on, I got a couple of people who were saying, I need to attend the course because now I'm at home and I have the time and I'm online. So I got 5 people doing an accounting software course during that time. And later on, they said, which other course you run now when you're on the lockdown? So last week, someone said, I want to attend this course. When are you running it? I said, I'm waiting to know if the president is opening up or not. So I couldn't answer her. And immediately when they announced another 14 days, yesterday I sent out a flyer for the next session of training. And I found it liberating when I stopped thinking of the gloom. That's when my mind was able to be open to think of the opportunities. And I think as we always prepare, so when it is the seasons that are not friendly, what are we doing in those seasons to prepare for the next season so that we're not sitting there in that season doing nothing? And I think as I shared on Monday about Joseph preparing for the 7 years of famine,
right.
For him to prepare for the 7 years of famine, we realized that he had to do a lot of work. He had to build the granaries, he had to have some logistics and some infrastructure. Now that we have the time at the lockdown, this is the time for us to remodel our businesses. If you didn't have systems for doing something, this is the time to build the system because you have the time. This is the time to build, if you wanted to do a course, to run a course, for example, the music courses that Elder Stephen is talking about, this is the time maybe they'll be developing the curriculum and things like that. So during this time, we can ask God, what can we do now to prepare for the next season? So this is our time to prepare for the next season. We're not going to last in this season for a long time, but if the season ends and you're not ready for the next season, of course, you'd have missed a lot. So I think what I will encourage us, as we know, as sure as night comes and then the day follows, we know the day will come, but what are we going to be doing with our day if we haven't prepared during this night season?
Right. Wow. And Elder Stephen, you actually talked about this in your session on times and seasons about the cyclic nature and how it applies in a repetitive way. And I think Lillian has brought it home very well. If you see day, there's going to be night. If you see night, there's going to be day, and the cycle continues on and on again. But she said something there that I'd like to pick your mind on to follow up regarding especially the issue of our psyche, our mentality, and our disposition in terms of how we think about the circumstances. If you look at what's going on now, you've got businesses being hit left, right, center, businesses shutting down, businesses laying off staff, business not being able to pay their staff. And what normally happens is that it's very easy for someone to then slump into a depression and to start thinking, oh, the world has ended. You've been an entrepreneur for a very long time, and you will know just as well as I do that as long as you're doing businesses, you're going to have seasons where you literally fall flat on your face, you fall flat on your back. Sometimes you fall so hard that the ground would even give way and cover a bit of your body. How important does it become to be able to watch and guard your mind and the attitude that you have? Because if you don't maintain a positive attitude, you're doomed with or without COVID or before or post, aren't you?
Yes, Ben, what you've mentioned there is really quite important. A lot of the things happen in our minds. They happen. This is really where, COVID doesn't get in here, but we allow the fear that comes from COVID to get inside here. And that's what really paralyzes us. And I think it's one of the key things I would say in business, now that we are considering this COVID and all these kind of things, is the word resilience. The word resilience is, I don't know, I've not yet found where we can learn it or which course they teach on resilience, but I do not know why we don't spend time on those things that really matter. We teach
that's an idea for Lillian to pick up as a course and do an online course on resilience.
One of the units can be on resilience. And basically resilience, I think the reason why it's not taught probably is because you can't learn it on chalk and board. It is something that you learn on feet and hands. It is built as you break walls. Resilience comes, every wall you break, that's a unit you earn in the course of resilience. But one of the key things that defines, it's not about experience, it's not about the cleverness of your idea. It's not about the environment you're working in. Yes, it's a bit about those, but the key defining factor is resilience. How you handle toughness by remaining tougher than the toughness. I think that's really one of the key things that I've seen, because businesses will come to zero, they'll come to negative, but as long as there's resilience, there's hope. Resilience keeps hope alive, because you know that tomorrow I'll still be here. Tomorrow I'll be back here. But once you're not resilient in your spirit, and really the resilience, it comes as you break walls, but also it comes from the reassurance of who you are. And we as Christians, we know who we are, and we know whose we are. And once you hold on to those, you know that even if anything comes, even if things turn the way I did not hope, I know that I have hope in Christ Jesus. So it's one of the things that there's that toughness. And I thank God that God has given resilience to everyone. It's not about muscles. It's not about, you might say the other guy is, his frame is bigger than mine. But God has said, anyone can have it. Anyone can take it. You don't have to qualify, as long as you're ready to stand up whenever you hit a hard wall. Whenever you hit a roadblock, you're ready to get up. You'll build up your resilience muscles. And I think that's one of the key things I would say to most of the people who have been hard hit. Most of the people who have, you can be very innovative, but once you don't have the one foot on resilience, your innovation will just collapse, because resilience holds everything. That's the beginning, where things stand and sit on that. Yeah.
Right. And so we're going to be going over to our chat. For those of you who are joining us on Zoom, please, there's a chat box somewhere on the bottom. Right down the middle, if you look at your screen, right down the middle, there's a place where you can go to the chat and you can post your questions there. Also, if you're following us on Facebook Live, you can also post your questions. And we already have a couple of those coming through, and we'll be getting to your Q&A in the next 5 or 6 minutes or so. And then this session really is supposed to be a Q&A, so we're going to focus a lot more on your questions and getting them answered. But even as we get to that, I just want to keep on this issue for just a little bit longer because I feel it's really, really important. I've been watching a lot of Jesus movies and films, if you want to call it that. There's a wonderful new series, TV series called The Chosen, which I recommend you look for if you haven't seen it yet. It's basically about the life of Jesus, but being told in sort of a serialized form. Yesterday, I was watching a movie, Paul, the Apostle of Christ. And one of the things that struck me in line with what Elder Stephen has just said about resilience and the things that these guys had to endure. Now, of course, for them, it wasn't about business. It was about the gospel. But the principle still applies, I guess. And I'll start with you, Lillian. This whole thing of, if you look at almost everything Jesus talked about, it was about this, right? About don't worry, do not fear, be strong, be courageous. In almost everything to do with our lives, whether it's spiritual or especially now in the area of business, it seems to start about here, about managing your mind, about managing your discipline, about managing your thought processes. How important has that been for you, even especially in a time when things are not going according to plan? You've done your business plans, you've gone to the bank and asked for a facility, maybe they've given you a loan, and then immediately after you get the loan, COVID hits, and all of a sudden you have no business coming your way. And the bank might give you a reprieve for another 3-4 months. But sooner or later, they're going to come saying, hey, COVID has ended, where's our money? How important has that been for you personally? And how have you managed keeping control of that little, small thing sitting on top of your shoulders?
Interesting. I'm trying to see if there's a biblical example I can give, but maybe just to say, as Elder Stephen said, what we conceive in our mind is what we actually actualize. So something cannot be unless you first of all visualize it. I mean, the Bible says, have your vision and make it plain. Though it may tarry, but at a point in time, it will come to pass. Be your generation to fulfill it, but the herald may run with it, whoever that herald may be. But I'm taken back to the story of Abraham. God told him to go, stand when he was being given the land, and he was told, look to the east, to the west, look as far as you can see, so shall I give you as your possession. And it's interesting, the first time, it's like when you read the Bible, different verses leap up to you different times. And the first time I heard that verse was when I just graduated many years ago in 1999. I'd gone for a lunch hour fellowship, and the preacher said, as far as you can see, so shall I give you possession. And he said, is that which your mind can conceive, the far that you can see yourself, is where God is able to take you. And that's the time I started thinking, okay, fine, I have the power to think, and I can only get what I've been able to think. And where does the thinking happen? It's in the mind, the conceiving of the mind. So if you can't see if you can't see yourself being in a particular place, you'll never go there. So all the places we are in, we travel there with our minds, with our imaginations first. And then God just mobilizes the resources, the law of attraction, mobilizes the resources, and everything comes in line, and that is fulfilled. And so that is when now the planning comes into place, because you say, okay, I've seen this far. So that's when I learned about writing my goals for life, writing my goals for every year. It's a habit that I got into every year. I'll write a goal of, okay, this year I'm trusting God for A, B, C, D. Some things happen that year. Some things take 5 or so many years, but I have testimonies and testimonies of things that I trusted God for, that because I visualized and documented it, just God enabled it to happen. And when you see something happening and you go back and you see, wow, it happened, it keeps me going, knowing that, God can actually make another one happen. For example, the MBA that you read that I had, when I heard about the MBA course, I really wanted to do the Edinburgh one is the one I wanted to do. But when I looked at the course prospectus, I was like, wow, I can't afford it, nowhere near to afford it. And so I saw it, but what I did, I wrote it.
If you don't mind me intruding, Lillian, how much was it? I think it's very important for people to understand when you talk about these figures and how obscene they can be sometimes, for people to get a perspective of what God is able to do. So if you don't mind sharing, yeah, how much was it?
That was like 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, it was each course was £500. 10 years ago. So that was about £20,000 or so for the courses that I had to do. And so I looked at it and I was like, okay, it would be nice to have it, but I can't afford it. But I wrote it down anyway. And interestingly, it took 5 years for the miracle to happen. And how did the miracle happen? One day, my boss calls me and does an appraisal and asks me, so where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? And I tell him, okay, I'm seeing myself in this 5 years, this place. So what do you need to get there? And one of the things that I felt strongly I needed to get there was to have an MBA for me to go to the next level that I wanted to do. So he asked me, which particular MBA do you want? And I said, I don't want any local MBA. I want the Edinburgh MBA, but I cannot afford it. And he told me, no, we also can't sponsor you for it. But here is a link of scholarships that you can look through and see if you can get any scholarship, maybe not for that university you want, but for any other. And I went, followed the link. I got 20 scholarships listed. Somewhere towards the end, I found a scholarship for Edinburgh Business School. I was like, wow, they've always had a scholarship. No, they had not always had the scholarship. They introduced the scholarship the year before. And I was like, God, you just brought the scholarship just for me. And of course, the long and the short, I applied for the scholarship and I got the scholarship. Of course, it was an eventful journey applying and everything, but I got a scholarship. So I was able to do my master's 5 years later from the day when I wanted to do it. But because I had visualized being able to do that particular master's, God made a way for it to happen. And so there are many different things that I've trusted God for, but it starts with the conceiving in the mind and not wavering. God may not do it that year, but whichever year in his appointed time, he's going to do it. So a lot starts with the conception in the mind. As far as you can see, I shall give it unto you. And during this COVID, I realized initially when the news were coming out, I was hearing people dying here, you know, Italy. And the moment I locked myself from hearing the news of the deaths and all that stuff, that's when I freed my mind to think, oh, now I can remodel my business. But as long as I was hearing news of people dying and everything, I was so scared. I was just,
Right.
I was just.
You sometimes have to shut down the news, don't you? You've literally got to shut it down because it actually gets into your head. Just a quick one from you, Lilian, before I go back to Elder Steve about this particular issue. Again, I know for the people who are following us on Facebook Live and here on Zoom, we'll get to your questions and talk about it, but I think it's very important to get a very good understanding of how you should prepare yourself for this. And I think this issue of the mind for me is probably the biggest take home from this, to understand how important that is. How do you relate the issue of what, you know, Elder Steve said about writing things down and preparing your mind with your relationship with God and being able to make sure you're in a place where, because these things you're talking about in your mind are not your ideas, are they? It's usually going to be God who nudges you through his Holy Spirit for you to get that idea to go to your boss, for example. So it might seem like a normal, natural thing that your boss is saying, here's the list of scholarships and all of that. But it's going to have been something that came from your personal place of prayer. How important was that? Because you can't just sit back and do nothing and think that the ideas are going to come. It's going to come from a deep place of being at God's feet, isn't it?
Yes, it does. And of course, God says that he gives you your heart's desires, but also your heart's desires have to be aligned to God's plan and God's will. And there's sometimes, I think that's where the discipline of having a personal devotion comes in, the discipline of reading God's word comes in. Because sometimes you can read God's word and it gives you. There was a time when I was in between. I wanted to leave a job. Actually, I decided to step out and go into consulting, but I was very scared. And around that time when I was doing my devotion, I was reading the story of was it Prophet Elisha, the one who left his plow to follow the prophet, and he was like, you just leave everything, I'm going to guide you to where you're going to go. And there's also a verse in Isaiah that says, I will lead you to the roads unknown. So there's sometimes when you have to first of all go back to the word, because when you read it in the scripture, you feel like, okay, God, you have my back on this. It is not just me going with my gut feeling, because your gut feeling is just as good as that. When you get it from the word of God, your faith is stirred up. And as long as your faith is stirred up for it, you will keep on course, because the Bible promises that your hope will not be. So having the scripture backing, and of course, committing it to God. God says, commit all your plans to him, and he's going to direct your paths. So there's a bit of praying, And there's the bit of getting a Rhema word, which you cannot get by just opening the scripture and getting the word that is in front of you, but the continuous studying of scripture, continuous hearing of the word of God, of course, being preached from different places. So that personal relationship with God also gives you, because God is the creator of everything. And so he can plant in you that idea. And when the idea is planted in you, and he keeps on like reminding you about it, or something comes up that reminds you of that, then you know, I'm in the track that God wants me to pursue. So I think God is a role. There's nothing that can happen without God enabling you to do. But you have to be in the frequency of God. As someone said, you could have wired your house with electricity and have the sockets and everything, but until the socket is switched on, the power will not be, the house will not light up. So until the Holy Spirit and the Spirit of God is switched on in you, the power is redundant. Yes.
Right. And I was telling someone this week that that's not going to come from just watching YouTube videos of Elder Stephen preaching. I mean, he's anointed and he will preach and everything, but there's a certain level or place that you'll not be able to get by just watching other preachers. You've actually got to go and cultivate that personal relationship, because it is what God then begins to use to speak to you individually. I mean, it's good to listen to other people and listen to devotionals and all of that, but until you yourself get personal, there's a certain level where you cannot be able to go to. Elder Stephen, this issue of preparedness, again, so we're being spiritual and practical at the same time. I sat down with a couple of friends here on my balcony about a week or so ago, and we're having a discussion about, you know, what happens post-COVID and preparing ourselves. And we're having a chat about how things are never going to be the same, and having, you know, targets and ambitions and dreams and all of that. We got to a point where we started talking about numbers. Each of us has a number. And so we were having discussions about, this is how much money I want God to give me. And that discussion then evolved into, okay, fine, so you want this much money, but what are you going to do with it? And it was very interesting to see that many people will be saying, I want God to give me 1 billion shillings. But if I ask you what you're going to do with that 1 billion shillings, most people don't have a clear plan that actually lays out what I'm going to do with this money. Which ties into what both of you have talked about, writing down the vision and being prepared and having all these things in order. How important is it for people when God throws this idea in their mind? How important is it for them to start actually doing the homework, writing down the idea, doing research on what it takes? How much money do I require? If I'm going to run a business, what is it going to cost me to start, to run? What things do I need to put in place, you know, to make all of these things happen? How important do you think that is for people to understand? Because again, one of the challenges we have, especially for those of us who are spiritual or in the church, is that we sort of wait for you know, God to avail these resources, and then even when He does, you end up messing up and losing everything because you didn't prepare properly.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I think the whole aspect of preparation, even as you look through the scripture, even Lillian herself, you know, spoke very well about it. The case of Joseph, you know, Joseph, for him to be able to step into the 7 years of nothingness, of emptiness, of famine, there was that space, the 7 years of preparation, when he had to prepare to come into that. And he did not waste that time. He was preparing, you know, drawing up plans, setting up granaries, systems, appointing people, and that kind of thing. And even we as believers in Christ, we need to know that when God points a way to us, most of the time he leaves the path for us to be able to work that out. He will just point to Moses and say, hey, look, that is the promised land over there. But he does not say, okay, now pass here, turn here. He just points the way and says, it's in that direction there. Do you see that mountain? That's the place. Then we have to get into the planning of how we are going to get to that place. Of course, working together with the Holy Spirit. And I think planning is very important. But I'll tell you one thing also about planning. You know, planning, God has the last say, but it doesn't mean we should not plan. You know, we plan. The beginning of the year, I really had very detailed and elaborate plans personally for for the businesses, for finance. But I'll tell you, even if you gave me I wouldn't have factored in COVID. I wouldn't have factored in, stay home, I wouldn't have factored in all these things. But it's an exercise I'll still do again. Come 2021, I'll still plan. I'll not say because last year the plans were all shattered. I'll still do it again, because the more you plan, the better you get at it. Now, I'll tell you one thing, like my 2020 plan, really, it was so detailed, but I allowed what I call variables. When you're planning, you put in some variables and you say, if this doesn't work out, what is going to step in? If this gets smaller instead of getting larger, what is going to get larger in its place? As you practice your planning, and you get better at it, and you realize that a plan is basically as good as the amount of effort you've put into it. And I'll tell you, even right now, much as we are staying at home, I'm still running according to the plan. I've tried to make sure that I keep within, especially when it comes to the area of finance. Lillian spoke very well about the whole aspect of getting your financial muscles ready and planned for. It is a place whereby you really need to keep within your plans. What are those things that you are planning to do that now financially you cannot do? Then you think, okay, fine, A, B, C, D. Is it necessary to have those things done? If it's necessary to have those things done, what are the other alternatives of getting them done, even within this current situation? All those are planning questions, planning processes. And, as you spend time, we always hear at the beginning of the year, spend time, resolutions and etc. But I think plans are a very key part of this. And the Holy Spirit works with our plans. He expects us to be able to plan out something, and then he comes in and then moves along the plan. So I think in terms of business, in terms of following what God has said, making the plan, writing it down, and running with it is something very, very important.
Right.
Yeah.
And it does say in Proverbs 91 that many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the will of the Lord that will be established. So whatever plans you make, I think it becomes very important to understand that at the end of the day, it's God's purpose that will stand. So it's in your best interests to try and make sure that you are aligned as much as possible with His plans. And he says in Romans 12, you renew your mind. Again, we talked about this already. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you're able to know God's good, pleasing, and perfect will by being able to have your mind in the right frame. One last question for the both of you, and then we'll go to the chat and pick up the questions from there. And this is the issue of dealing with calamity or devastation or a pandemic in this particular case, as with COVID. It hit me this week, again, from doing Bible study. And again, I'm going to reiterate this, being able to watch the visual depictions of the Bible that we see. So all these movies that we have, Reason, and the one that Mel Gibson did, Passion of the Christ, and Paul, Apostle of Christ. And I think there's one called Son of God that is about Jesus' life. I think what's really been powerful for me in aligning them with the Word of God is when you begin to sort of visualize how some of these things happen and what happened, it becomes really powerful. And one of the key things that stood out for me in all of these stories, and again, going back through the Bible, I've been reading through the book of John and looking at all the miracles that Jesus performed. And here's the thing that has really, really hit me hard. One of the biggest revelations I think I've had in the last few years. For every miracle that Jesus performed, raising a guy who was crippled, making Cana, wine at the wedding in Cana, that blind man in John 9, raising Lazarus from the dead, literally every single time that there needed to be a miracle, there had to be conditions for that miracle. Those conditions were usually at the worst of the worst of the worst of circumstances. A guy has died, right? That's the circumstance that necessitates a miracle. And so back to what you said, Lillian, I'll start with you and then we'll go to Elder Steve and then open up to the questions. A lot of people meet hard times in their lives. COVID has come you get an email saying, sorry, because of the circumstances, we are laying off. And you've been affected, so here's your letter. We can't afford to pay you your severance package, so good luck, God bless you, all right? And this is happening for very many people even now. And for a lot of people, this will be the end of the world. And they will slump into a place where it's tears and crying, and even the prayers before God are really more the pity parties than anything else. And you get the feeling that people sometimes forget that for the widow in Zarephath, and again, all of these single miracles that happen all across the Bible required something that necessitated that miracle. How does someone put themselves in a position where they see this hardship as an opportunity for a miracle, as opposed to, oh, my life has ended, it's over, what do I do now?
I think when you're going through the hard time, of course, you don't know that it's an opportunity for a miracle until on the other side. That's when you look retrospectively and see, actually, it was a miracle. I'm thinking when Moses was chased away from the palace, I mean, being a prince and everything, and then he goes to the wilderness. And it's like being from the palace to being a pauper, you know. And I'm imagining him going to the desert and feeling like, you know, this is just, it's bad life. And at that time, if you told him it needed for him to go there, for him to come back later on and rescue the whole generation, I mean, the whole nation of Israel from Egypt, it wouldn't have added up. But he needed to go there. And when he went there, there's a skill that he was being trained during that time. And I think I can see the skill that he learned during that journey when he was out of the palace was to become a shepherd. And he needed the skill of being a shepherd for him to later on shepherd a whole nation, not just a flock of sheep. But he needed to learn that skill for him to come back now and shepherd a whole nation. So sometimes God looks like he's made a tangent, a deviation on your course of life. And it doesn't look clear, like, okay, what's the plot here? You seem like God has lost the plot on you. But if you say, God, what am I supposed to learn in this season? What am I supposed to, what attribute? Maybe it could be a character thing that you need to learn in that season. It could be a skill you need to learn in that season. It could be different things that you need to learn in that season that you could not have learned in your comfort zone. If Moses remained in the palace, he would not have learned how to shepherd. And you will not have grown the patience of a shepherd to go and shepherd a whole nation through the wilderness and everything. I'm thinking if Joseph remained as his father's best son with a coat of many colors and just sitting by his father, if he never went and was sold into slavery and went into prison and everything, I don't think he could have maybe sharpened his skill of, you know, interpreting the dreams and everything. So I think God was taking him through a journey that was preparing him for another place. And so we all go through some journeys, and sometimes God takes us through those journeys. And I think what I'm learning, at least in my life, when I go through those situations, I want to know, what should I learn in this time? Because if you don't take on the lessons, you will miss the reason for that season. So every season there's something that
and end up doing retakes, because until you learn the lesson, God probably will leave you there for a bit.
You keep on doing retakes until you learn the lesson. So the sooner you learn the lesson, the sooner you're ready to move on. And you'll find they tend to be like, you're from a nice place, then you go like nose diving down, then you come up like with a steady ascent to go like, you know, to the next level. It's as if like you have a pullback, you know, I see how they do that. You pull back fast, then when you come back with a big force. So all the seasons have lessons to learn, and they tend, if you go through the Bible, all those people that seemed to have gone through bad situations, their characters were molded in those situations. Their abilities were refined in those situations for them now to be taken to their final calling that we know them as the heroes of. So before they got those heroic things that were able to accomplish, they had to go through those devastating seasons for them to maybe learn humility, for them to learn compassion, for them to learn whatever it is they needed to learn. But in this season, if you bring it back now to the COVID season, I think we have to step out of our comfort zones, because some people say creativity actually is born during the time of crisis. But are we using the current crisis to nurture our creativity skills, or we are stuck there in the crisis and we're not being any creative? So there are people who will come out of this crisis very, very creative. But there are some people who will have come out of this crisis and not any better. So I'm thinking in the current situation, we all have to ask God, what am I learning now that will make me a better person after this? And you might find actually you discover new things that you are not aware. You discover new skill sets that you're not aware that existed before. And you find that you're now walking in a new lane than you were walking when you went into the lockdown. There's some people, because of sitting at home, you can't go to work, you discover, oh, actually, I can be a writer, and you start writing. You discover that you can be an inspirational something, and you start doing it from home. You can discover that you actually knew how to bake very nice cakes, but you had no time for that. There are many homemade businesses that are actually being picked up right now. Many people going back to some hobbies that they used to have, but now you find this is the time for them to nurture the hobbies and actually take them to become businesses. But you can stay there at home lamenting, but you can choose to stay at home and improve on a certain skill set, learn a new skill set. By the time you come back to the world, you're coming back a new you, a better you. So I think no wasted experience, they say.
Right. Steve, anything to add to that?
I think Lillian has clearly and very accurately put it out. Just maybe add a little bit in the area of calamity, or in the area of turbulence, in the area of resistance. I always have this mindset. I look at calamity in two ways, or tough times in two ways. Tough times come to either make us stronger in our walk. It comes to build your muscle, or it comes to scatter. Let me explain that one. We've not talked a little bit, we've not talked much on that one. Calamity, when it comes to scatter, it means you're either, your season is running out and you need to jump onto the next boat into the new season. So calamity comes to scatter and to disorganize you and put you, like earlier in the week, we've talked a lot about, transition from one season to another. Now, during the time of transition from one season to another, there's a lot of turbulence and calamity. Now, that's the type of calamity which comes to scatter. It comes to kill. It comes to destroy old things so that you may be transitioned into new things. So I look at tough times, I look at turbulent times in one of those two ways. Has it come to reinforce my current position, to build me up as I do my move, or has it come to redirect me and say, hey, you're on the wrong track, get off that boat, jump onto something else? So that's the way, whichever way calamity comes to do you good, that's the bottom line. Calamity comes to do you good. Of course, as it does you good, it's going to scratch you, it's going to hurt you, it's going to punch you, it's going to cause you to bleed, it's going to cause you, but it's for your good, just as you see, even looking at childbirth, a child is being born, but why is there blood? Why is there pain? Why is there all these shouts? And, it's for the good. It's for the good. So calamity, pain, harshness, toughness comes to do you good in one of those two ways. That's what I would want to add on to that.
Wow, that's very deep. Nothing to add. I just got two quick scriptures I know that we have some people who maybe haven't spent a lot of time studying the Bible. Maybe you don't have a personal relationship with God, and some of this stuff might sound a bit alien to you. But there's a very clear message in terms of how this God that makes the entire universe works, and His things have never changed over the generations. In Paul's letter to the Romans, he tells them all things work for good, according to them that love the Lord. And the basis and foundation being that you have a relationship with God. And as long as you do that, no matter what happens, right? All things will work for you good, even in cases where it is you who has made some really bad mistakes and ended up in a place where you have calamity. Somehow God will take that. And I think from Lillian's story earlier this week about Joseph, I think it's Joseph himself, under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, who said, what you meant for evil, God turned into good. And so no matter what happens in terms of a calamity, God will find a way of turning that into good and making it work as long as you're keeping in step with Him. The other verse is in Lamentations 3 that says, and sort of my favorite verses. I think I've had my fair share of calamities in my life, and I had to find a verse that I can cling on to, not to run mad. And there's a wonderful verse in Lamentations 3 that says, "Who can speak and have it happen if the Lord has not decreed it?" And being able to understand that this sovereign God who made the universe is the creator of heaven and earth, if I am going to believe that he's in charge of everything, then surely nothing happens without his knowledge or permission or acceptance, because I am his child, right? And so being able to have that understanding then helps me to try and look for, I think, like you said, Lillian, what lessons am I learning in this time? What is God trying to teach me that I sort of now take away from this? Let's get to the questions now. It's midday, so we're going to start opening up the chat line. So if you're on Facebook, please do post your question. We'll get it there and pass it on to Lillian and to Elder Steve. Also here on Zoom, of course, you can share your questions. And what I'll do is I'm going to just go question by question. So I'll pass a question to each of you, and then you can try and respond to it as quickly as possible, and then we'll move on to the other one. I'll start with you, Lilian. The first question coming in from someone who is asking, and I guess it's one of the big questions that you can imagine would come through. From your perspective, what do you see as some of the opportunities that could be arising post COVID-19 that someone would want to concentrate their efforts on? Is there anything in particular that you think that might be of interest that someone can think about?
I think there's lots of opportunities depending on where you are, which sector you are, and what your interests are. Of course, the first line of opportunities has been in the tech area. People who are in tech, there's lots of people looking for solutions for different things, making your life better, making your things easier. And so, for example, people who are doing website development and e-commerce systems, I think they'll be on high demand, because now people want to have everything online to sell. If they were taking being online for granted, is the way to go. So there are people everyone who is doing something with technology, it's time for everyone to be tech savvy. If you are not having an online presence, I think people who are doing what are they really going to have opportunities. But I think opportunities, sometimes you realize them, how do you say? You tend to have a bias of opportunities available depending on your orientation. Now, for me as a trainer, I am seeing there's a lot of opportunities of now training beyond the borders, because initially I'll have to wait for people to come to my office and attend a training. Last year, May, there's someone who came from, he came all the way from Congo, and he was coming by bus every Saturday. You'll be on a bus like on Friday morning and Friday night to come in the morning for the Saturday classes. But now I can have anyone attending the training without having to be physically in my class. And I'm seeing that's a great opportunity for me. Now my training is going to be beyond Kampala Central, so to speak, and now to the outer parts of Uganda and even to East Africa. So now I'm positioning my post to think East Africa, to think beyond Uganda. So that's already an opportunity. Now, if you are in whichever sector you are in, I don't know which sector you're in, every sector has their different opportunities. I was amused the other day when, I'm just giving you an example of how you can find an opportunity. So I went to the supermarket to look for a shampoo to wash the hair. And they're saying it's over. And I'm like, when I usually stocking, they brought in the morning and it's all finished. And you're thinking, I thought everyone is running after sanitizers and all those different things. But you know, shampoos are getting finished. And I went to I don't know how many shops and there were no shampoos. And I don't think anyone is thinking that there's a market for shampoos, because people are at home, they can't go to the salon to wash their hair. Now they're washing their hair at home and everything. So that's an example of an opportunity that is there, but I don't know if people are taking advantage. So opportunities are as many as we can think about them. There are as many.
I can tell you, I definitely wouldn't mind some shampoo. I didn't know I had dandruff. As you can see, obviously, I've had quite some challenges with the hair on my face. And the other day, so I said earlier before we started the call, I was having a chat with Lilian, and I was trying to comb my hair, and there were so many things flying out. At some point, I think it was a bird or two. It turned out dandruff. So I wouldn't mind getting my hands on some shampoo right now, because It definitely has become something. I guess one of the other things, and let me bring it to Steve as well now. One of the other things that has happened, for example, one of the biggest booming businesses in this entire time has been the guys who do anything to do with bicycles. I've never seen so many people looking to buy as they have in this entire time. And so the person who had positioned themselves well is making a killing, and it's not just going to be for now, it's going to be even this, right? I mean, said Lillian must learn how to ride a bicycle, so she'll probably be a customer in that regard. There's a question here about e-learning. Someone said a question asking the idea of adult young education, rather early learning education, the nursery in particular. Of course, with COVID-19 has come the advent of e-learning, and they're asking how do they think about incorporating e-learning permanently. This pandemic has ended. What would you advise someone like that to do? I think, Lillian, that should be you, because you're the one who's doing a lot of the teaching things. So if someone wanted to incorporate a lot of e-learning into a nursery school or something like that, maybe for homework or things like that, what would be the best way for them to go about that?
I think it means you have to have a way of having your curriculum online if you hadn't already. Since of course the children are at home, my son is actually doing something online, and so it's easy for you as a parent to get what is already existing online. So they've perfected, one of the apps that he's using is Adapted Mind. And so it has different courses. You choose, you want to do maths, English, literature, science, whatever it is. And so for each, depending on the grade that your child is, they choose that one, and then they're actually marking real time. So you're getting real-time feedback, and you get an email as a parent to know your child did how many questions and how many they got right and the ones that they failed. And so you're feeling as a parent, you're not babysitting your child to study, because the thing is very interactive, but you're also getting real-time feedback on their performance. So there's opportunity, of course, for e-learning, but of course there is, for lack of a better word, an infrastructure for it. You have to have the curriculum, and the curriculum has to be put online in a way that it is interactive. Because as a child, they cannot sit there reading like a whole something. It has to be something that is, I think you said, is for young children, something that is very eye-catchy, very interesting, very interactive. I think the one he uses has some, the cartoon characters are the ones who are actually instructing him. So of course it's fun. You don't feel like it's your usual teacher. So it's a very big opportunity, because even when the lockdown is lifted, I'm thinking if we still have to maintain the social distancing in schools, there will only be so many children who can go to any particular school. So which means most schools are going online. So if you already have a school, then how do you work with a tech person? Because you need technology now. So work with a tech person who can get for you a user-friendly interface for you to make sure that you're giving the right curriculum to your child, but your child is able to interface. But also you have to be cognizant of who your clients are. Are your parents able to afford data? Because now data is, I was saying the other day, data is a new fuel. And if you have a fuel guzzler for an internet service provider, you are in trouble. So then also, how then also do you protect your child when they're online, that they're not straying into other sites that of course are not. So, or can you have just a dedicated gadget that is separate from being a real-time online live session like we're having right now? You can have something that is put like in a tablet, and then so you're giving this tablet to the parents, and the parents can still interface with the curriculum. I don't know, I am not thinking much of the options, but that's what I'm thinking.
It definitely works. Let me come to you now. How important is it going to be for people to learn to incorporate technology in everything they do? I mean, Lilian has just said data is the new fuel. I don't think anyone can argue that the people who made the most money in this pandemic have been the telecom companies. Amazon has added another 20 or so billion shillings to their value because of what they do online. And I know that for many people, the idea of innovating and beginning to think outside the box has been happening for a while. Right now, a good friend of mine, Dr. Umar Senkubuge, who started doing the health sector, I think about 2 years ago, by starting to do something where you don't have to go to a clinic to be able to get tested and get a prescription. So he set up a sort of mobile clinics at different pharmacies. So you go to a pharmacy, you'll have a guy there who will come and test you, and you can get your results. They can even, come and pick them from you, and then send you a prescription online. And that's obviously in this time has probably been one of the biggest things. You're sick, you can't move, because you need to get that DC who's probably gone to his farm to pick matoke. So what do you do in that mix? And he's been able to fix that. How important is it for all of us, regardless of whether you're selling bananas or running Blue Cruise, to understand that technology is completely indispensable going forward from this? I mean, I think it seems a bit obvious, but some people still things that things will go back to how we were. That's never going to happen, is it?
Yes, thank you, Ben. Before I get into that, I just wanted to make a general comment with regards to business. I mean, I've had so many people have been sending queries, questions, asking, I hear masks are a big business. I hear, digital thermometers are a big business. Can I get into importing that? It's really the same thing we are discussing, but I want to make a general comment. There are two types of business, and they exist. If going back to what we learned earlier in the week, when a new season is coming in, there's the part when the season is fading in, the rise. Then there's a part when the season stabilizes, the plateau. Then there's a part when it starts going down. Now, there are those businesses that I call opportunistic businesses. Now, those thrive within the interchange of seasons. When a season is changing, you have those opportunistic businesses, and those businesses are very lucrative. You can earn double, triple, 10 times, so many times what you would have earned at any other time. But the only downside to it is that they are time bound. They're limited. If it's to do with masks, there are many people now who are stuck with masks. Many people are stuck with all these different things because they thought that was the new thing. But people made money. I mean, masks which we were getting for, was it 1,000 shillings or 2,000? We're going for 20,000, 30,000 each, but that was for a limited time. Now, those are opportunistic businesses, and they thrive only within the time of the interchange when two seasons are interacting. But then there are those businesses that now thrive during the regime of the season, the time when the season has settled in and it is very well defined. Now, those businesses are normally solid businesses, and you don't make much money there, but you are sustained for a longer time. There is less disruption. There is more certainty, and I would want us to think about those kind of businesses. I mean, opportunistic businesses, you can do them. Anyone can do them, but they are limited and for a short time. And whatever you earn out of them, the kind of wealth we are talking about is wealth which is built slowly and over time, and that's the wealth which comes in that kind of area when you're talking about businesses that are solid and which can go on. Now, back to your question, the whole idea of technology, why I wanted to bring in this background first, because I see the next season we are going into, one of the graces, I would call them graces, is technology. In other words, one of the things that is going to receive a lot of favor is technology. So we have to find a way of integrating it into every aspect of our business. And now with the background of the whole COVID, and technology can help you build customer reassurances. People would say, like, for example, the one person was asking about their business to do with child care and daycare and these kind of things. I mean, people will be so scared now to take their children out to any daycare. What if they get a temperature? What if they do this? So now that's the place where technology comes in. You can get an app, say, for example, and say, what, this app is going to be sending updates to the parents every 30 minutes or whatever onto their phone. Maybe this app, you can maybe decide to take temperatures of the child every other 1 hour or something, and then tabulate it and send it, So technology is going to become a very important part and in all the different aspects of our business. It's not that we should all go into the business of IT, but we should have IT come into our businesses. I think that's really the idea, because the grace for this season is really technology. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very important there. Another very important question here for Lillian. You're probably what you'd call the austerity expert it's what you've been doing for your entire life. Being mean is part of your profession. And I guess now you've been vindicated in ways that people can't even begin to imagine. And everywhere that you turn, you see people beginning to think about that 50K they wasted on pizza 2 months ago, and they're thinking, if I had that, that would have lasted us, so important is it for people to begin to enforce some very strict financial discipline, not only for themselves as individuals, especially businesses? I think I can just quick my example before you answer the question. In the last 16 years or so, I've had the privilege, or should I call it misfortune, of running startup companies. Usually, all the businesses I've run, from Kwese to FM to my own business, have been businesses where you're literally having to live day to day to day to day. In one case, it's updates, or you're running on like a really, really skin budget. And I learned from the very onset, from the very beginning, that the only way you can guarantee surviving longer than anyone else, keep costs down to the very, very bare minimum. I always see a lot of companies around, and because I have a lot of friends who are CEOs and run businesses, and I'm always tough in the ear, and I'm telling them, I think you are overstaffed. I think the people that you have are maybe 35 to 40% more than what you need. And they'll say, but you can't do that. How would you? And now it turns out that these are the guys who are now suddenly saying we can't maintain this entire payroll, because in most cases, especially for business, we all know that and Premier League club, and even they're struggling now. If your wage bill goes beyond 30 to 40% of your revenue, you're living on the brink on a daily basis, and yet that's how most people live. And so I guess the question is, how do business owners, and we have a whole of them here, I'm sure we'll be watching this online, people who have businesses, how do they maneuver that difficult decision of having to learn to run on what I like to call skin budget, where everything some people will call it cost cutting or frugality, whatever it is, but it's got to be the thing, right? How do they do that?
Okay, how do they do that? I think, because right now, what is very key in this season, the key thing for every business to survive, if they are to survive, is cash. Cash is king. And to prepare for your cash now, you should have done it 7 years ago, like Joseph did. Yeah.
7 years. You should have told this to us in 2013, Lillian.
We were so on Monday, maybe just to recap, on Monday, my session, I took the case study of Joseph. And so Joseph told Pharaoh, we are going to have 7 years of famine, but before the 7 years of famine, we're going to have 7 years of plenty. So the challenge happens that we never recognize our years of plenty. And that's what I've been preaching around the few financial literacy courses that I have. I tell people, learn to recognize your years of plenty, because when you recognize your years of plenty, you will know you have to save in that year. It's very hard to save in years of scarcity. You save in your years of plenty. So how do you recognize this is my season of plenty that I save? Because that's what Joseph did. So God warned them, you're going to have 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. So which means God gave them a 7-year grace period to prepare for the famine. I don't know, we didn't get a grace period to prepare for this COVID, but every business should ideally have to have that system of building the reserves. So Joseph had like a 14-year business plan. We're going to have to save consistently 20% of our turnover for 7 years, because those 7 years will take us through another 7 years of scarcity. So even in this season, some businesses actually having no problems. I've seen some people posting there, they've already paid their rent for the next 3 months, they've paid their workers and everything. But you'll find for those ones, they had built the reserves, not now, they've been building the reserves over time. It's become like a habit. And that's where now the system comes in. Have you built in your business a system of always, how do you say, building reserves? So at a personal level, having the habit of saving, you know, because you never know when the emergency will come, when the dry season will come. But what I've learned in my life is to recognize the times when I'm seemingly having more than is enough for the immediate needs. I know the surplus is to keep it apart, because when the year of, what is it called, the year of famine will come. So for the, how do you call it, for the children of Israel, they knew in advance. Many of us, we may not be able to know in advance. But what I've learned, the cue for me is the season when I seem to be having more than enough, I know there's going to be followed by a season of scarcity. So it's having,
I mean, like you say, yeah, you see night, day is coming, right? You see day, night is coming.
Yes. So I've tried to learn to save in those seasons of plenty to prepare for the season of scarcity. I'm being reminded, I will not remember the story I was sharing last week, I think. One of the Decembers, I think last, like 2018, so where I stay in my neighborhood, we have a neighborhood group for all the neighbors in the village. And so that day someone posted and said, water is gone. And then another one after a couple of days, like, hey, water is gone. And another one, like a week or so later, water is finished. Another one, 2 weeks, is when they realize that water is not there. So what's the difference? The water got finished on day one for all of us, but some people, it took them a week or two to realize that water is over. And what had happened? The people with no water reserves, when the tap got switched off from national water, they immediately realized there's no water. The people who had 500-liter tanks stayed longer. The one who had 5,000-liter tanks stayed longer. The ones who had 10,000-liter tanks stayed longest, and actually were helping the other people who didn't have any reserves. You know, come to my place and I'll give you some jerry cans of water. In the same way also with business. Those who had built their reserves will survive. We'll see the first month, they are fine. Okay, there are people who, like, when March ended, they didn't pay their salaries because they didn't have reserves. They hadn't any reserves. Those who had 1 month of reserve paid their salaries for 1 month, which is April, and then they're not seeing what they're going to do in March. The ones who had bigger reserves are paying even May and are going to pay coming forward. So it's one thing to build reserves, but also there's a one thing to have the discipline of managing that reserve. I'm imagining when Joseph collected the grain over a period of 7 years, he didn't collect them overnight. He collected the grain for 7 years. Then after the 7 years, he made sure that that grain distribution did not distribute and get finished in 1 year. He had to make sure that this distribution of grain is going to see us through for 7 complete years without lacking. And that requires a very good system of tracking, of record keeping, and of distribution. I'm not saying record keeping because I'm an accountant, but that's the only way you can have sanity in making sure that later on when you're distributing, you have a systematic way of distributing. And we are seeing now, even during that season, when the famine came, because Joseph was very prepared.
Joseph.
During the famine time, he was actually reaping big. He was making money because people came and bought the grain. When their money got finished, they sold their livestock, they sold their land, and unfortunately, they ended up selling themselves for slavery. And even in this season, cash is what is there, the grain for now. And people are still have to eat, so they are using the money they had in the bank. The money is getting finished. So what do? We go sell these and whatever easy things to dispose of to have food on the table. Then your next thing you start here people selling their properties, and that's what is happening. But the people who will not sell themselves short are the people who had built reserves. So how do you build reserves? You can't do it overnight. It takes a discipline that a business has to have in place over a period of time. And every business that has the right discipline and the right structure is not going to just survive for this COVID season, but it's going to survive for another season, because there will be another turn at some point. So I think building the structures for reserves and managing those reserves, the accountants call it cash flow management, it's going to see you through.
Well, I'm sorry, but Mrs. Katiso, where the hell were you 7 years ago? Why are you telling this to us now? I guess I think one of the things, and I'm going to come to Steve in just a moment about the discipline. But just to point out what you've said, think about it. If someone had been building these reserves, I'm talking about on an individual level, right? Or even as a business for the last 7 years, the stuff that you've just talked about as a principle. If they'd been doing this for the last 7 years, and all of a sudden, the foolish ones, those of us, it's almost all of us really, who are not building reserves, are suddenly having to sell properties like you say, right? Because you're desperate, you're having to sell these things very cheaply. You've got a prime plot of land, but because you literally don't have anything else, you have to let this go. And the buyer in this case has the control. They're able to push you down because the value is very low. And what happens is the person with the cash right now is going to get a really good asset at a very low value. And when this thing has fizzled over and ended in another 4 or 5 years, he's going to be laughing at you because he's taken your property at maybe 60% of what it's actually worth. And then it's going to appreciate and get its value again. So I guess that becomes really important in being able to learn this lesson. And my hope is that everyone who's watching us on this call and following this begins to learn now to start to do this, because this is not going to be the last time we see something like this. Like you said, night, day, night, day. We are in night, day is coming, and then there will be another night. And so how you prepare for that becomes important. So the question then for Steve becomes, what sort of personal insights can you share from your personal life? I mean, from what I know about you and the businesses that you run, you sort of are a master at building reserves. I've never seen you driving a brand new car. You drive 15-year-old Japanese cars. They're still nice. I mean, you have a Nissan I like very much. Let's be honest, it's still an old car. It's a 2004, 2005 model. And yet, same thing with Lillian. And yet I know you could, if you wanted to, you could walk into Spare Motors and say, give me a 2020 GLC. What is it that has helped you build that discipline, not to abuse your years of plenty, to be wasteful like the rest of us are? You get a windfall and you're looking for the latest iPhone, right? It's what we do. It's what we've been taught as Ugandans. It's our lifestyle. Something that we obviously need to change now. The question is, what have you done that has made it easier for you to have that sort of discipline that we can learn from?
Ben, I wish you knew the true story.
Wait, you also like us?
I would tell you, I made it. I could say I'm not the best. I'm not there, but I've fought through, and probably I've also learned a lot. I can share from my own personal experiences. But I think we all begin somewhere. That's where I also began. But my turning point came when I started to realize that actually the business is different from Stephen. The business is like a child, you know? You're raising up a child and you're giving this child your everything. But there's got to come a time when the child will be everything. The child will own lots of things, but you're not going to come up and say, that's my life, you know? You child, that's my life. You know, you let them be. And all you do is you're proud and say, hey, you know what, that guy there who owns that city there, that's my son. But you don't go and say, aha, now I put in everything into you now. This city that you've owned, it is mine, you know? That's where the turning point came for me, to realize that I am waking up, I'm spending sleepless nights, but I need to know that the business is another human being or another life I am building, which is not mine, you know? I will benefit from it, but there's a limit. I cannot just say that, well, today we've been paid 200 million shillings, you know, that's mine. No, because once you take that money, then the business will collapse. So I think the difference comes in, again, here. Of course, there's education, but we can be only educated this much. But then from education now, the mindset comes in. What is it? And again, we turning it to the side of us being Christians. We also need to we start realizing as Christians that, you know what, this world that we are living in is not even a shadow of the world that is to come. You know, the things that we are enjoying and receiving today will be nothing compared to the one that we are going to be walking and living in soon, when eternity comes in. So to be able to understand that even these are all worldly things, not that they should be shunned and thrown away. No, you can, if you try to start having enough of something, you realize that you will never have enough.
Right, because there'll be a guy who has a Rolls Royce and you want that. Yeah,
you know, you want the next. And at one point, I've been to a place where I've been like Solomon, and I've said vanity. All this is vanity. You know, I think God allows us to get to that point where you are hit and realize that this is vanity. Phones, you know, having the latest this and the other. As long as it can meet your current need, you know, there will always be that advert which will show you that this next phone can, you know, flip, it can do a back somersault and, you know, do all these kind of things. And you say, I want it, but what do you need it for? You know, that kind of thing. I think personally, like I'll be honest with you, it's not that I have the savings and all these kind of things, the beautiful things that Lillian has really elaborated, but at least I've tried to walk that journey. And it has come out of hard slaps, hard learning, where you know that, hey, these things that the business is, the money that the business is making, you need to stash it away, you need to keep it aside, and the business pays you. And you make sure that what the business pays you is enough for you to survive. It's enough for you to live. It's enough for you to be able to meet your goals, you know, and thrive. So I think that's one of the things that we as people who are into business or even professionals, we need to be able to understand that the life that we are building in another business is a separate life. One day it will grow so big and have to leave home. You have to leave your house and go and set up somewhere, and probably their house will be 10 times bigger than yours. But you can't go and claim and say, hey, I'm the one who raised you, get out of this house, it's mine. You know, everything is mine, it's mine, it's mine. No, I think once you cross that line, you know that business, you sacrifice for it to live, not for yourself. I think that's a liberator for me. Yeah.
Well, that's very true. Interestingly, I should. So Lillian, we need to be wrapping up in a few minutes. So just a couple of questions for you. This one for you, Lillian. Somebody's asking. Absalom is asking: is everyone called to be a Joseph, or are there specific people that God calls and equips to save the rest of us? And then also a question about any advice on cash flow management in the post-COVID-19 period? What do you do with that? Before you answer those questions, to just share two quick personal stories. Over the last month or so, my wife and I have been feeling the Lord telling us to be very careful about how we manage finances, especially, and the area of contentment. And I think there's a verse in 1 Timothy where he says, if you have food and clothes, that's enough. Be content and be happy with that. And I think for us, it's proven to be such a big thing, because many people might be aware, for last 3 years or so, I was running one of the big media houses, and then before COVID happened, the business shut down. And so thankfully, we'd been in a place where some of Lillian's lessons, because I'd been at a place before where she'd been teaching, and we'd picked up some of those. And so we had traveled somewhere, and I felt I needed a new phone. And like Steve was saying, they tell you that this phone can do somersaults and take videos in slow-mo, and then you're thinking, oh, I want. But when you look at the big picture, you realize in reality, you might have the cash to be able to buy it, but I can't afford it, right? And so what I eventually did instead was keep my old banked up Samsung and buy a power bank instead, because the power bank will keep it going for another 3-4 years, and the phone will do the things that I might have a bit more weight to carry around, but the phone will do its job. And with the car, we had a car that was a Guzzler. It was a 2-liter. Was spending 20, 25,000, 30K in some cases per day on fuel, because I move around quite a little bit. And we realized that this was not going to be sustainable. And so I downgraded and bought a nice, very old, small Mitsubishi That's a 1.6 liter engine. It's fun to drive, but its consumption is quite decent. So when you look at all the things that have been going on, you realize that it's actually saved you a lot more in the long run than what it would be now. But also going forward, imagine if you because you had been in a season of plenty, like Lillian was saying, and you have access to money, and you've gone and bought a 4 liter, V8 Land Rover Discovery. Then all of a sudden, you can't go anywhere, and the guy who has cash is going to come and buy it from you at 2 million shillings because you can't afford to keep it anyway, right? So I guess it becomes some very, very big lessons to pick up from there. So over to you, Lilian. Is everyone called to be a Joseph, or are there specific people that God will call and equip to save others? But also any advice that you might have very quickly on cash flow management in the post-COVID period, and then we'll get some quick thoughts briefly from Stephen, and then we'll wrap up in the next 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ben. I'm not so sure I understand Absalom's everyone calls to be a Joseph, but maybe just to try to understand. So, I mean, you're saying, is everyone called to run a business? And or some people are just... I think
he's saying, is everyone called to be the one that gathers the reserves and all of that? Because the idea that Joseph was doing it for everyone else.
Okay, but okay, fine, thank you. So Joseph had commissioners, so he could be like one of the commissioners of Joseph, because of course, being the prime minister, he can't do all those different things. He had to delegate. And I think when is it? On Monday, I talked about the 5-point plan that Joseph must have had in place. And so the second point in place, okay, the first one was planning for how the whole strategy is going to be implemented. And I remember the second thing was appointing the commissioners. And the third thing was now doing the collection, of course, and maybe building the granaries and having a system of collecting whatever needed to be collecting and distributing later on. Now, looking on the second action point of appointing the commissioners, I think if you're not called to be a Joseph, but do you qualify to be one of the commissioners, if you incorporate, for example, so you're not be the leader, but you're supporting the leader. And I think this is the season where people are being laid off because they cannot qualify to be one of the commissioners, so to speak. You are not relevant in the new
essential staff, as we're calling them these days, right? Right.
Yes. So we have this essential staff, the ones that are having stickers going on the road. But even within every business, there are people who are essential staff. Like now, for my team at Mwine, I was looking at each of them and I'm saying, okay, this one is good with how do you say, writing and can do the social media updates. This other one can cycle and go to Garden City to water the plants. And this other one, and then there are people you're looking and I'm like, this one, I just don't see how to do.
What does this person do, right? You don't want to be one of those, do you? Right.
So in this period,
we're running out of time, so I just need to get your thoughts quickly on cash flow management. Any quick fire tips on what someone needs to do?
So cash flow management, you start with what you have right now, okay? And what you have right now, plan it, and you see how far can it stretch you. And if it can only stretch you for 1 month, then you find out what then do you do? How do you bring in more money to cover for the deficit? Or how do you reduce your cost? Because you have to stretch for 3 months minimum, ideally 6 months and beyond. So look at your current cash status and see if the money you have right now can't stretch you for the next 3 months without an extra inflow. You have two options. Look for ways to get more inflow, or look for ways of reducing your outflows so that you're able to survive. But check now, can you survive for the next 3 months without going on the red? And if you are going to be on the red in the next 3 months, what can you do now to prevent that position from happening? I think that's how I can summarize
what happens to someone who was in the red 2 months ago?
If you're already in the red 2 months ago, so you have to look for alternative sources of funds. You can borrow from your friends and relatives. I think it might even go to your enemies. Anyway, I don't know. Or you dispose some of the things that are easily disposable. If you have that, if you had a fuel guzzler and you just need a comfortable car, do you know if you sell it and you still have another car, you freed up some cash. You have some assets that you can dispose. But the challenge of disposing assets at this moment is that you're going to dispose them off at a throwaway price because you're cash trapped. So looking for how to get money, I don't know. If you're already on the red 2 months ago, it's not a good idea to go and borrow money from the bank again because you're already in the red. And of course, post-COVID, the bank is only going to give loans to people who were not in the red before COVID. As Mr.Ben said, if you were poor before COVID, you can't expect the government to be your savior now just because COVID has come. And so a lot of our life discipline before COVID is actually going to affect we are going to survive in the next period. Your credibility with the bank is going to be determined pre-COVID. Your credibility with your suppliers is going to be determined pre-COVID. If you're a very good payer, you're paying your suppliers very well, it's easy to say, you see, now I was paying you very well, understand the situation. But if I was not good before COVID, and then you expect me to have mercy on you during this season, it becomes a bit tricky. So yes, I think we have to be the best we can be.
Well, thank you very much. 30 seconds for you, Elder Steve. Any last thoughts from you?
Thank you so much, Ben, and thanks again for putting this together. If there's anything I would want to say is mainly about many of us are small businessmen. Some of us are really just traders, but I still want to call all of us businessmen, you know. I think going forward, what I really see we will need to do is to amalgamate. That's one of the things I feel strongly about. And I'm going to start trying to see how I can put my weight into helping small businesses come together, coming together, working together to build bigger things. You know, it's better for you to be a small part of the big thing, as they always say, instead of being the whole thing of a small thing. So that's one of the strong things I feel, to come together, you know, to amalgamate. And I would
collaboration.
Yes, collaboration, more than even collaboration, you know, building one thing. And the second thing is to do with specialization. Specialization, because we as human beings, we have different strengths. And I've seen it because of the background from where we come from. Most of us, I mean, we call ourselves hustlers. You know, people are so proud to be called a hustler. That fully represents the kind of mindset we all rise out of, you know, because the hustler will celebrate when they score, when they stop, you know, when they graduate. So they would want to have the whole limelight on them. And I would want us to start moving away from rising out of the hustler mentality and saying, you know what, I am the owner of this, I am the establisher of this. Let's begin to specialize. If your area, your strength is in a certain particular section, work hard at it, pass on the baton to someone else in another section. And that's how these big conglomerates are built. These big businesses are built. I have a friend of mine in the US, I think I shared this sometime back, who in the early days of the apps, he wrote an app for a laundromat. You know, much earlier, before these sharing apps came up. So he did that, and within no time, I think 3-4 years after that, the business had really picked up, and he sold out. He sold out. He did not cling on and say, hey, you know, I'm the founder, I'm the shareholder, I'm this. He just picked up the idea, put together and then invited other people to come in. You know, it was a very clear thing, and said, you know what, you can buy this stake into this business. These are our financials. And soon the company just exploded across the whole of the USA. And that collaboration and working together is what I want to start advocating for us as Ugandans, particularly us as Christians living in Uganda, in Africa. Let us get out of the hustler mentality of, I came from the ghetto, you know what, you don't know, I used to have only 1 meal a week. So
you don't know my jam food day, I think is what we like to say, right?
Sorry, you don't know my this. No, that is a good, it gives you determination, but it can also lead you astray in that you want to own everything. You want to say, well, I have struggled, I have fought, I have made it, I won't allow anyone in, you know, it's my glory, it's my everything. No, I think we need to learn, yes, you've come from very far, you've come from a very dark history, but collaborate, work with others, give them a bit of the cake, say, hey, you know what, you're very good at marketing, I've built this solution, I'm very poor at marketing, can you take on? So that's really my parting shot. I would say, we as businessmen and women, let's not remain small, let's not remain with the idea of beginning to the end. Let us conglomerate, let us collaborate, let us share. Thanks.
Right. Thank you very much, Steve. And there's biblical precedent. When the temple was being built from the early days, you could see that there was always collaboration in everything. Whoever was good at something did what they were good at and excelled at doing that. So it becomes very important. I want to say, I know we're short of over time by a little bit, but it was so engaging and important to hear all these very important insights from the both of you, to Lillian, Katiso, and Stephen Ochola. Thank you so much for joining us on the call. I should point out that the recording is going to be available on Facebook for those that need to listen in, and I would strongly recommend that you go pick it up again and listen, because there's some very, very deep things shared in there. But also you can share the links in your WhatsApp groups and different places so people can actually, pick up on some of these insights. If I might point out 2 or 3 key things that stood out for me from what Steve and Lillian have said. Your mind is a very important weapon, and until you've got that fixed, you're going to be in trouble. Lillian has pointed out very strongly about building reserves and preparing yourself in the time of plenty, something that she's picked up from her session earlier this week. Steve has been talking about times and seasons as well, and has also pointed out the very important need for collaboration, especially in this time and going forward, and that becomes an important thing. So for all of you who joined us, thanks a lot for being with us, and I guess we'll let you depart when you can. Thanks for joining us, and stay rooted. The other thing is, make sure that you are building a relationship with God, because all your ideas are going to be coming from Him. So if you're not in His presence, you will be making plans that might go to waste. So make sure you stay rooted in the Word, hearing from Him. Otherwise, thank you so much on behalf of me and my family, my lovely wife, who is, I think, making us food in the kitchen. Have yourselves a lovely time. Enjoy the lockdown. Stay safe. And if you do find someone with shampoo, please send them to me. My dandruff is a bit too much. So bye-bye, everyone. Good to see all of you.
Hi, thanks everyone.
Everyone, have a nice day.
Bye.